All right. So, bell ringer for today. Went over a lot of information yesterday in a short time, but hey, we got to get through World War II. We got to get towards modern times by the end of the year. So, describe the invasion of Italy. Why was this invasion a huge success for the Allied powers? What was discussed at the Tehran conference? There you go. So, within your response, try to include who was there. So, we went over this big three, right? What they discussed. So, what was in it for the U.S.? What was in it for the Soviet Union? What did Churchill think about this meeting? Ooh, there you go. I give you a minute to finish up here. All right. So, the invasion of Italy. What do we have here? What do we got? Go ahead, Chris.
The Allies began their invasion of Italy by giving off patrols and landing on the island of Sicily. The British wanted to take over the island while they let the U.S. invade the mainland of Italy. This was a huge success for the Allies because Italy had surrendered to them. Taking over Italy gave them a chance to send bombings through to Germany so they could destroy any potential threats that Germany was making.
Awesome. Good work. Good work. Yep. So, this invasion of Italy happens right after Operation Torch, right? After the successful takeover the Allied powers into North Africa, pushing the Axis powers out of North Africa, eliminating any type of resources, any type of territory, obviously, that they're using to maybe mine valuable raw materials, And this sets up an invasion point into the soft underbelly, right? So that being said, we talked about it. Montgomery and Great Britain invade Sicily, that small island right off the coast of Italy. And the United States aiming a little bit higher, right? The west coast of Italy. Okay, getting into Rome, the capital, and many of these large populated areas. And for the United States, this was difficult, right? It took a little bit of time to fully take over Italy because we all know the United States wasn't really experienced with this new style of fighting and this new type of fight, and let alone traveling across a body of water to get there. Okay, so it was really difficult to invade Italy and fully take it over, even though it's the weakest link, right? It's the weakest link of the Axis powers. We know Italy was struggling. They didn't have the military capability like Germany did. So with that being said, the United States, Great Britain, the Allied powers saw it was in their best interest to attack the Axis powers at their weakest point, and that's through Italy. All right, so with that being said, Italy took a long time to actually fully take over. By the end of 1943, 1944, the Allied powers successfully took it over. So it took about a year and a half, 2 years for them to fully take over this country and eliminate one of the Axis powers. So this moment, 1944, right after this invasion, Italy will drop out of the Axis powers and join the Allied powers. They jump ship again. They jump sides, just like in World War I. Okay, and we talked about what happened to Mussolini. Okay, so his body was mutilated by the people. Okay, that many of the people in Italy obviously didn't like his authoritative rule for 21 years of their country and how he treated his people, obviously with the black shirts. Okay, and there was no type of political opinion. Okay, it was all taken away, and he led by force, led by his military. All right, so they strung him up, right, in a populated city and threw many different items at his body, along with his wife and many other political officials. And this was a sign, right, to Hitler. You're next, right? You're next. So the Allied powers, as they're liberating these countries and pushing out the Axis powers, okay, it's really a hard pill for Hitler to swallow because he knows he's going to be this next person. What happened to Mussolini? All right, and I'm glad you talked about that, Chris, about the bombing runs over Germany. Now that the Allied powers have a sound military bases set up here in Italy, they're now close enough to launch different types of bombing runs over top of Germany. Okay, they could target many industrial areas, businesses, factories, and try to eliminate their production, eliminate their supplies, try to crush the morale of the German people. Ever since the start of this war, they were untouched, right? They were expanding to many different parts all throughout Western Europe and into the Soviet Union, which we talked about with Operation Barbarossa, right? So Germany now is finally getting some heat, right? They're getting targeted. They're getting many of their major cities finally targeted and destroyed. Okay, and the Allied powers now control the air. So the Luftwaffe at this moment is out of commission, right? And that's really why we see so much success by Germany, because they're control the skies. But that's over now. That's over. All right. So with that, like I mentioned, the Allies control the skies now after this invasion of Italy. They took out one of the major Axis powers, and we finally have boots on the ground in Europe. We set up a two-front war, right? Okay. So the Tehran Conference, what was so significant there? What did they discuss? What did they go over? What do we have here? This Tehran Conference. Jakari, what do you have? Okay. All right. So we had Stalin, right? Soviet Union, Churchill, Great Britain, and FDR, the United States. First time they ever met. Okay. And that was pretty cool with that sword of Stalingrad, just to show respect of what the Soviet Union did there at Stalingrad. Okay. And what did they talk about? How are they going to attack? What was this setup of this invasion going to be called? And where were they going to do it? Yeah, good job. Operation Overlord. Okay, that's the D-Day invasion. That's going to happen in northern France, Normandy, France. Okay, right up here at the top of France, right across the English Channel. Right, Stalin is really, really wanting this to happen. Okay, obviously, he just pushed back the German army at Stalingrad, and he's seeing success on the Eastern Front. All right, and we already know Great Britain and the United States pushing the Axis powers into Italy. Right, so Stalin wants a little bit more, though. he knows that Germany is not going to be backing down or surrendering at any moment at this time. So there needs to be a third front, right? The United States has to attack on another front to make sure that they can push back the German army. So Stalin, that's what he wants. Okay, he wants the Normandy invasion. He wants the D-Day invasion. Okay, what do you think FDR wants? I don't think I mentioned this in your class. I apologize. What do you think FDR wants from this end of the bargain here? What do you think? What is the U.S., what conflict are they in at the same time? Who are they fighting at the same time? Jakar? Yeah, Japan. Yeah, good job. So with that being said, FDR says once we take over Germany, once we push them back to their own borders and they surrender, we need some help out in the Pacific, right? We need some help to take care of Japan. Right? So FDR, Stalin, they agree on that. Okay, so that's what's in it for the United States. After Germany surrenders, after they give up, right, Soviet Union is going to help them out in the Pacific theater. Right, we'll get to that eventually soon, but and we'll talk why the atomic bombs were used to try to prevent the Soviet Union from getting involved and to try to prevent the spread of communism. Okay, so we'll discuss that a little bit more when we get towards the end of the war. That's what they want. What do you think Churchill's thinking, though? What do you think Churchill's thinking? So Stalin and Roosevelt, they're schmoozing up together. They're talking about what they want, what advantages they want. What do you think Churchill's thinking? What do you think? What do you think? Cody, what do you think? Do you think he likes that FDR and Stalin are coming together and discussing their ideas and their I guess you could say their favorable outcomes? No. Why do you think he's shaking his head? Why do you think he's a little upset about this?
Probably just wants the war to be over.
Okay, yeah, he wants the war to be over, and he was just getting bombed constantly through the Blitz, right? Yeah, okay. Glad you mentioned that. Okay, so Great Britain, they're right here in Europe, right? Soviet Union is not going to go anywhere, right? It's a communist country. They're right in their backyard. So if FDR, way across the Atlantic Ocean, is having good relationships and good ties with Stalin, what does that look like for Great Britain? Looks a little sad, right? It's like, hey, once this war is actually over, where does this, place us, right? This communist threat, this huge power that's really just taking on the German army by themselves, is going to be in our backyard. You can't have a sound relationship with them, right? You can't really trust them. So yeah, at this moment with World War II, we need them to help push back Germany, but at the same time, we can't become too friendly with them because after the war, there's probably going to be a little bit of conflicts, issues arising. And what happens? The Cold War. Okay? Cold War. So Churchill is kind of seeing in the future here. And he knew that we can't trust the Soviets as much as we want, especially at this time and with World War II. Okay? So he wasn't too keen, he wasn't too happy with the relationship of Roosevelt and Stalin at this time. And like I mentioned, okay, with that video I showed you, you never saw Roosevelt walking up, right? You never saw him greeting Stalin or Churchill on his feet. There's a reason for that, right? He was trying to hold back his disability, right? Try to hide it. And at the same time, he was pretty sick at this moment. He was getting tired. He was about ready to die, to be honest. 1945, he passes away. And Stalin sees this, right? So he's going to try to take advantage of these meetings. He's going to try to do what he can to claim as much land as possible, with these meetings towards the end of World War II. So he's already setting up for the Soviet expansion after this war, right? So he's almost like taking advantage of the situation in a way. All right, so that's just a little bit of a setup to the Cold War. So whenever you think of the Cold War, you can say maybe it already starts here in 1943, right before World War II actually ends. All right, so terms for today. We have Battle of Midway and island hopping. Now, like I said, if we have time at the end, I'd like to show you the video of the Tuskegee Airmen, and I'll prepare you for tomorrow, your reading and questions. So there you go. All right, so let's go over this real quick. Battle of Midway, what do we have? What do we got? Go ahead, Cody.
Naval battle that took place in the Pacific Theater happened from June 4th to the 7th. It was 6 months after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So we're backtracking just a bit, but obviously it's really important to talk about the Pacific Theater here, right at the same time of what's going on, what we just went over with this invasion of Italy. Okay, all this is happening all at once, so it's really hard to just kind of move around the timeline. It's really difficult, to be honest. So we're backtracking just a bit and talk about the Pacific Theater and how this is going to change and for the United States, for the better of the Allied powers. Okay, at this moment, we already know Japan was this advancing threat out in the Pacific. Okay, we discussed, with the Philippines, how that fell. Okay, obviously Pearl Harbor we talked about, the Doolittle raids, and how the United States is getting back at Japan. We talked about Coral Sea, how this was the first aircraft carrier versus aircraft carrier battle out in the open water. And the United States stopped the advancement of Japan right down here. They were New Guinea. If they would have won that battle, who knows? They probably would have took out the supply line the Allied powers had in Australia. So that being said, not long after Battle of Coral Sea, we have the Battle of Midway, right? And this was an interesting battle just because Battle of Midway was the turning point in the Pacific Theater. Here we talked about the turning point in the European theater, which was Stalingrad, right? Now we're talking about the turning point in the Pacific Theater with the Battle of Midway. Like I mentioned, I had to backtrack a little bit, but make sure everything works in a timeline of, I guess you'd say, good fashion, and that's why I did the way I went through it. So with the Battle of Midway, this is right out here, guys, pretty close to where Hawaii is. So Midway Islands, it's midway between the United States and Japan, and it's right close to Hawaii. Right? We know Pearl Harbor just got attacked, right? And we talked about how devastating that event really was. But it didn't take out the United States whole fleet for long. The United States had the ability to rebuild these battleships and get back into the fight. All right. So actually, one of the aircraft carriers from the Battle of Coral Sea went back to Pearl Harbor, repaired a little bit. It's called the Yorktown, and went out to see how to fight at Battle of Midway. And really, we won this battle because we intercepted a few messages by Japan. And we had a few, I guess you could say, code readers in a way that will later create the CIA in the United States, where we were intercepting their messages and understanding exactly their point of attack. And we sent a message out saying that one of our water tanks out in Battle of Midway was corrupted, right? It was no good. So this was Japan's way of trying to take an advantage of this scenario. So they send 4 aircraft carriers, really the only aircraft carriers they have, 4 of them, out to the Battle of Midway to try to take over this island. They knew that if they could take over the Midway Islands, the United States really was susceptible to an attack on the West Coast, where California is. Okay, and Japan's trying to island hop their way out in the Pacific. So it's up to the United States to have a key victory here. If not, who knows? The next attack could have happened, right, on California, on the West Coast. So this was a very significant battle. And luckily, we intercepted this message, and we really diverted them into attacking Midway with full strength, right? So the United States, knowing where they're going to attack from, really the battle took place within 5 minutes. The whole devastation of the battle took place within 5 minutes. The United States knew exactly where they're going to be traveling to, and we took advantage of it. And this was very similar, like I said, with Coral Sea, aircraft carrier versus aircraft carrier out in the open water. Okay, dogfights out in the open air. And the United States was successful. We sunk 4 of their aircraft carriers, really their whole fleet of aircraft carriers. 250 aircraft were destroyed. And the United States only lost 1 aircraft carrier. Okay, so for this was a huge victory for the U.S. And from here on out, Japan's aggression, Japan's advancement out in the Pacific is stopped. Right, from here on out now, the United States is going to be pushing Japan back to their own borders. And they do that by the last term that you just put down, island hopping. Right, it really just makes, it's really as simple as what the term meant, okay, what it says. So island hopping is just the United States pushing Japan back, island by island, back to their border. Does that make sense? Okay, it just says it really in the name. And that's what the United States is going to do from here on out after the Battle of Midway. Japan lost all their aircraft carriers right in that battle alone, like I mentioned, within 5 minutes. And this turns the tide in the Pacific. This turns the tide for the United States, the Allied powers. Right? So we see success, like I mentioned, with the invasion of Italy, Operation Torch, right? And now here, the Battle of Midway out in the Pacific Ocean. So it's looking pretty good for the Allied powers, right? Heck yeah, heck yeah. So make sure you guys remember that, the turning points in Europe, right, with Stalingrad, and the turning point in the Pacific theater with the Battle of Midway. All right, so with the Battle of Midway happening and the United States pushing Japan back now in the Pacific, what now can the United States do more and more of? They can do these Doolittle raids more and more, right? They can target these key cities within Japan and try to destroy a lot of their production. And we already know Japan's an island. They're limited to what resources they have. And if we destroy all the supplies, all the armaments, all their production, this war is going to be over quick, right? Okay. Unfortunately, this happens in 1942. The war won't end until another 3 years later. So Japan actually holds strong for quite a bit of time. But it's just a matter of time until the United States fully takes this war in her own hands, right? And Japan surrenders. All right, so like I mentioned, this island hopping allows the U.S. to set up air bases pretty easy and target Japan with the different bombing runs, targeting Tokyo, targeting Hiroshima, Nagasaki, right? I'll talk about it. A lot of their industrial areas. So yeah, I'm sure you know already that MacArthur is licking his lips, right, to try to take back the Philippines. Remember I said he was like the Terminator. He wants to get it back. Okay, so we'll get to that here soon. Is there any questions? You guys good? Hold on there? Okay. Yep. So Battle of Midway, we know as the turning point in the Pacific theater. Island hopping. There we go. Y'all good, Jakari? Okay. So real quick, Tuskegee Airmen, this is what the lesson's about tomorrow. So I'm going to play a video here towards the end of class, and you guys can just complete the reading tomorrow, and that'll be it. So the Tuskegee Airmen, real quick, is a African-American fighter group, dogfights, right, up in the air, and they were very successful with their bombing runs over top of Germany. All right, so like I mentioned, this invasion of Italy, the surrender of Italy eventually, right? This allows the Allied powers to target many of these key cities within Germany and try to destroy as much production as possible. Got that, Angel? Okay. So the Tuskegee Airmen, we talked about the Tuskegee Institute with the, obviously with the progressive era, right? Okay, Booker T. Washington, you guys remember talking about him? Just shake your head, yeah, so it makes me feel better. Yeah, there we go. So with the Tuskegee Institute, this was training many African Americans in vocational skills, vocational studies. But now, right, they called it the experiment, right? Like I mentioned before, many of these politicians, people, with high-ranking status in the United States, thought that African Americans didn't have the ability to understand these new types of weaponry, these new types of equipment. But obviously, they proved them wrong. Tuskegee Airmen were very successful with targeting many cities and key areas within Germany throughout the time of World War II. But this institute in Tuskegee, Alabama, was preparing these troops, these pilots, okay, with this new type of equipment, with this new type of fighter plane, okay, and FDR wrote it into bill that will have wrote it into action that the African Americans will have the ability to fight side by side, right, with white men in the United States Army military. At the same time, we all know that segregation won't end in the United States. Even with these efforts, with fighting in World War II, segregation will still occur. Jim Crow laws in the South will prevent many of these African Americans to have equal, I guess you could say, societal gains in the South and many parts of the United States. So even after heroic events like the Tuskegee Airmen, we'll still see segregation in the U.S., unfortunately. All right, is there any questions on that? I'm going to play a video real quick. It's really good at explaining the Tuskegee Airmen and many of their significance, their importance during World War II. And like I said, I'll have this reading ready to go for you tomorrow about the Tuskegee Airmen. You guys good? All right, play this video for you.